Alright, now that we've done a basic flash on the board and verified function, we're going to walk through the steps to set up a config for this machine. So what I want to do for this mill is I want GRBL enabled. I want the millimeters per line segment to set to 1 millimeter. This will make the pause button and G-code stuff instantaneous instead of having a delay. XYZ motors, I need the current to 4.3. This is the calculations for the steps per millimeter we did earlier. Here's the number you want to put in there. Excel and junction deviation right there. Max speeds is in that range. That's due to the calculations I'm estimating based off the steppers. Set up the standard switches as end stops and probe. Hook up the spindle to PE1, mist and air blast to PB8, vacuum to PI11. So these two here, or this actually I should say the spindle and the vacuum are connected to the small FETs that you would typically on a 3D printer use for like fans or whatever. And then the PB8, the mist and air blast, is connected to the larger green connector. Alright, I want an ambient thermistor set on the ADC 1.1. Alright, so now I'm going to assume that you've already, from the last video, reviewed all of the configs and from the website, the wiki and whatnot, and the repository. Config CNC is the one I'm going to start with. Alright, GRBL mode is already set to true, so I don't need to change that. Flash on boot is set to true. So default feed rate, I want that set to be somewhere around this range. So 1800 seems about right. That's not horrible for this machine, so I might want to go a little lower, maybe 1750 or something, but not a big deal. Alright, here's the millimeter per line segment. So you need to uncomment this one out so that it is active, and that is this one here. So we've already done those two. Now current, we're going to skip that one first because we're going to do these ones here. So the steps per millimeter is this number here. Copy it, and my my machine has all three have the same steps per millimeter, so I know that, and I don't have a delta, I just have XYZ, so alpha, beta, gamma headers. If you look here, they're listed, XYZ. Alright, now microsteps, I'm actually going to set these to 64. I believe, yeah, I have that right here, times 64 microstepping. So I'm going to run these at 64 because this is the base microstepping that you send to the driver. This is off the MCU. And then the driver can have interpolation up to 256, but you don't have to set that higher. You can actually have the interpolation off. Alright, so now, since we're already in here, we have the max rate set, 1800, that seems pretty reasonable. Now, I know we set it up above already, and the XYZ axis max speeds are different than the actuator. They can be the max speeds are the same in this situation, but in the situation like a Delta printer, you can have higher actuator speeds than you actually have axis speeds. So that's the reason for the two. On a normal Cartesian machine like I'm running now, all three of these can be the same as the ones above. Okay, now since we're in here, we're going to set the acceleration and the junction deviation as well. So the junction deviation is 0.005, so we need to add a 0 there. And then the acceleration, default acceleration is at 500. I want it quite a bit lower. I want it at 75 on this machine. So that's up there. And then you can actually set a different one for the Z because sometimes you want to run it slower. So I'm actually going to set that to 50 just because it's the Z axis and it has actually lifting vertically against gravity. So whatever, it's fine. I can also change all of these later, as you'll see through Smoothieboard, through the config editor. It makes it very easy to edit all of this stuff. Okay, so now we are at we should do, so this is where you set the interpolation. So I'm not using TMC 2660s, so I could just get rid of this whole section if I wanted to. It auto switches based on which board you have from a pin setting. So interpolation I have set to false right now. I think I'm going to leave it there for the moment. Basically the interpolation makes it a lot quieter. If you enable it, it'll go to 256 stepping, but there is a note in the data sheet about a potential issue with it, so some people don't use it or don't recommend it. In my situation, I'm going to leave it off for the moment. I can always change that. Okay, so now we've done the max speeds, we've done the accel, the junction deviation, the steps per millimeter. We're at the current. So the current for these, I want at 4.3 on all of them. And well, actually the delta I can set to, I'm going to set it to 1.0, or I guess I could set 0.0. It's going to throw an error though saying it shouldn't have that current, I believe, but whatever. That'll pop up in the config thing, and we can change that later if we need to. It's disabled anyways. That motor's not running. So, all right. Next, we're on to temperature control. So, I want to add a control here that'll switch this. Have an ADC 1.1 as an ambient. All right. So first, you start with ambient enable equals true, ambient dot thermistor underscore pin equals ADC 1.1 1_1, sorry. Ambient designator equals A. Ambient thermistor equals EPCOS 100K. That happens to be the one I'm using. And I believe that there should just give us an ambient temperature just like this does here. All right. Next, we want to add, we have the spindle enable. We want that as M3 and M5. The spindle output pin I want as PE1. And output type is digital since it's just on off. All right. Now I'm going to copy this whole thing to make this easier on me, because then I always remember. Now next, I'm going to change these to mist and then I'm going to change this to M7 and M9. So that'll give me the on and off. And then I want PB8 as my output pin. All right, next, let's copy all this again. And now I'm going to use this one as the vacuum. Which is the dust extractor. So you could also call it whatever, dust, whatever you want to do. All right, vacuum. And then my commands for this are going to be M10 and M11, which are in normal CNC world, I believe that's clamp and unclamp. But I don't have an actuated clamp, so it's fine. All right, so PI11 is the pin I want to use. All right, so now if you want to have a kill button that directly kills it, you enable this or set this to true. I will do that later, but at this moment I'm not going to. The PWM frequencies are irrelevant if you're using PWM stuff. We're not, but they're there. The laser, this is if you want the laser module. End stops. Since I'm using default end stops, I don't have to change anything because I'm just using switches. The default is set up for just a normal switch to ground type end stop. The only thing I do need to turn off, I don't want to home the Z. I don't have a Z end stop, I just have this. So I don't want to home that at all, so that's false. So now when I hit home, it'll just home the X and Y. Now, your max travel, yeah, you see the timeout there? That's the maximum distance. So if your machine is longer than that, or if it's super short, you may want to modify that. All right, this is your homing rate, the fast rate, that's the slow rate. You can edit those. You got the X, Y, Z. The limit enables, basically what those are is a hard limit. So if you are running your machine and it gets out of coordinates, like say you do something dumb, move it when it's off, whatever, and then you go to move it past that point, when it hits an end stop, it will actually hard limit shut off the whole machine. So on CNCs, this is probably a good one to have on, as well as many other machines, but I'm going to have that on. All right, the Z probe enable, I want that set to true because I'm going to be using a probe on the probe pin. Now the probe pin is, this one's by default, this has a comparator on it. Everything is set up just like this to run a normal switch. Has, Cartesian grid. I'll probably enable that later, but I'm not going to mess with that right now because basically we're just trying to get everything working. So network enable is false at the moment because I'm not using the network, so I don't need that on. All right, so you want to put it on your SD card as config.ini and replace the one that you had on there. I still have a flashme.bin on there. You don't need that unless you're flashing new firmware. So now that this config has been saved to the SD card, it is ready to put in the machine and start the config settings with SmoothPie.